Welcome to Revenge Vine. My father slid a piece of paper across the dining room table on the night of his 60th birthday and said, "Sign it, or don't come back to this house." 43 relatives watched me read it. I want you to hold that image for a second. 43 people. My aunts, my uncles, my cousins who flew in from 3 different states, my grandmother who was turning 91 in 2 months, and my younger brother sitting right next to my father, with the exact same expression, patient, certain, already decided. The paper was a promissory note, drafted by an actual attorney, notarized, with my full legal name printed at the top and a dollar amount in the middle that I had to read twice before my brain accepted it. $45,000. That was what my family decided I owed my brother so he could make the down payment on a house. And I want to be clear about something before I tell you what happened next, because I've told pieces of this story to a few close friends, and the first question everyone asks is the same. Why would your family think you owe your brother anything? That's exactly what I asked myself, while I sat there holding that piece of paper with 43 people watching my face. Before I tell you what I said, and what I did, I want to ask you something. What time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely read them, and I want to know who's here with me tonight. Okay, let me take you back to the beginning, because none of this makes sense without it. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I'm a senior financial analyst at a mid-sized logistics company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have a 1-bedroom apartment that I've lived in for 4 years, a car I bought myself, and a savings account that I have never once asked my family to contribute to. I also have a brother named Derek who is 27, still lives in my parents' house, and has been told his entire life that everything he needs will be provided. I was not told that. I was told from about the age of 12, when it became clear that I was the one in the family who got straight A's and stayed out of trouble and figured things out on her own. I was told that I was the capable one, the responsible one, the one who would be fine. Derek was sensitive. Derek had a hard time in school. Derek needed more support. Derek needed more patience. Derek needed more of everything, and I was expected to need less. And somehow that framing followed both of us all the way into adulthood. I paid for my own college. My parents took out a loan for Derek's, a loan they later couldn't manage, a loan that, I would find out years later, they had quietly refinanced twice. I moved out at 22, the month after graduation. Derek moved back in at 25 after his first apartment fell through. He had been living rent-free ever since. I want to be honest with you. I loved my brother. I'm using the past tense carefully, not because I don't still love him, but because the way I love him now is different, cleaner, I think, but more distant. For most of our lives, I defended him. When relatives made comments about him not having a job, I redirected. When my parents made excuses for things he did, I tried to understand their perspective. I was the quiet one who kept things smooth, because keeping things smooth was what I'd been trained to do since I was 12 years old. I need to tell you about something that happened 2 years before the birthday dinner, because it matters. Derek came to me in the spring and told me he wanted to buy a house. He had found a place, a starter home, 3 bedrooms, reasonable neighborhood, and he was short on the down payment. He needed $45,000. He said he had been saving, that he had almost $30,000, and that if he could just borrow the difference, he would pay me back within 3 years because he was starting a new job in the fall. I said no. Not angrily. Not with a lecture. I said no. I don't have that kind of money available, and even if I did, I wouldn't feel comfortable with a private loan that large between siblings. I told him I hoped the new job went well, and that maybe in a year or 2, he'd be in a better position to qualify for a larger mortgage. Derek didn't speak to me for 6 weeks. My mother called me twice during those 6 weeks to tell me that I had really hurt him. My father said nothing, which I now understand was its own form of communication. When Derek and I eventually started talking again, nothing was formally resolved. We just resumed being family the way you sometimes do, surface level, functional, carefully not touching the thing that happened. The new job fell through before it started. Derek stayed home. The house he wanted sold to someone else. I thought the matter was closed. I was wrong. In October of last year, My parents started planning my father's 60th birthday celebration. My mother called it a milestone and said they wanted to do something special, something the whole family would remember. They booked a private room at a restaurant my family had been going to for holidays my entire life. They sent formal invitations. They asked me to make sure I came in from Charlotte and to please arrive by 6, not later. I blocked off the weekend. I drove 3 hours. I wore a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion because my mother had mentioned it was a nicer venue than usual. The dinner started normally. There were appetizers. There was wine. There were the usual rounds of conversation that happen when extended family gets together: who's living where, who has a new job, who's getting married. My grandmother was seated at the head of the table. My father was next to her, then my mother, then Derek, then me, then the rest spreading outward in both directions. The main course arrived. We ate. My father gave a brief speech about gratitude and family. My grandmother cried a little. People applauded. I genuinely thought the night was going well. Then my father stood up again. He said there was one more thing he wanted to address while everyone was together. He said it the way you'd say you wanted to make an announcement about a family vacation: casual, warm, like what was coming was good news. He reached under his chair and pulled out a manila folder. He slid it down the table toward me. I opened it. Inside was the promissory note. $45,000. My full name. My brother's name. Repayment terms. A notary stamp. My she, T, P, ther, T, the, T. The family helped Derek get where he needs to be. Claire, you're in a position to do this. We're asking you to sign. I looked at my mother. She was nodding. I looked at Derek. He was looking at the table. I looked around at 43 people who were all very, very quiet. I need to stop here, because I want to explain something that I don't think gets said enough in situations like this. When something shocking happens in front of a crowd, people assume you feel embarrassed. And yes, there was embarrassment. But the stronger feeling, the one that took over almost immediately, was clarity. It was like being doused with cold water. Everything I had been telling myself for years about my family, all the generous interpretations I had extended to them over and over, collapsed in about 30 seconds while I sat there holding a notarized document that they had prepared without telling me. They had hired an attorney. They had notarized it. They had planned this for my father's birthday dinner, in front of the entire family, because they calculated that I would be less likely to say no in public. I set the folder down on the table. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I looked at my father and I said, clearly enough for the table to hear, I'm not signing this. My mother said, Claire. I said, no. My father said that this was a family matter and that I needed to think about what I was doing. I said I had thought about it. Derek finally looked up and said that I'd always acted like I was better than the rest of them, that everything came easy to me and I never once looked back to help, that he was my brother, and I was sitting here refusing to do the one thing that would actually change his life. I want you to think about that framing for a moment, because I've thought about it a lot since then. The one thing that would change his life. As if $45,000 appearing in his account would do the thing that steady employment and financial discipline and time could not. As if my refusal was the obstacle between Derek and his potential, and not the 15 years of being told that someone else would always cover the gap. My grandmother, bless her, said quietly, "What has Derek paid for so far?" Nobody answered her. One of my aunts started to say something about families sticking together. I didn't let her finish. I picked up my purse. I pushed back my chair. I looked at my father and said one sentence. I said, "You prepared this without telling me, at your birthday dinner, in front of our whole family, because you thought I wouldn't say no in public. I want everyone at this table to understand exactly what just happened here." Then I walked out. I did not say goodbye to my grandmother, and I still feel bad about that. I texted her the next morning, and she responded with a heart emoji and said she understood. She's 90 years old and sharper than anyone at that table. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for about 4 minutes. My hands were shaking not from fear, more from the physical release of adrenaline. I drove to a gas station 2 miles away, bought a bottle of water, and called my best friend. She asked me what I needed. I said I needed to talk through what I was about to do, because I had already decided what I was about to do, and I wanted someone else to know. Here's what I did in the following 48 hours. First, I called my bank. I had a joint savings account with my mother, a holdover from when I was in college that I had never gotten around to closing. There was very little money in it, but I closed it that weekend. Not because of the balance, but because I was not going to leave any financial thread connected. Second, I changed the emergency contact on my work records. My mother had been listed for years. I updated it to my best friend. Third, and this is the part that some people think is extreme but I believe saved me a significant amount of stress, I emailed my HR department. Not to report anything, just to update my personal information and to let them know that I was having a family situation and that if anyone contacted my workplace on my behalf without my authorization, I wanted it documented. HR thanked me and noted it in my file. I did this because I know my family. I know my mother in particular will use every available channel when she feels she's losing control of a situation. I did not block anyone that first weekend. I let the calls go to voicemail. By Sunday night, I had 17 voicemails. My mother had called 9 times. My father had called 4. Derek had called twice. 2 of my aunts had called once each. My mother's voicemails started disappointed, moved to hurt, then arrived at something I can only describe as negotiating. She said she understood I was upset. She said the dinner wasn't the right venue. She could see that now. She said if I would just come home and talk, we could figure something out. I noticed she didn't say the promissory note was off the table. My father's voicemails were shorter. The first one said I needed to think about what I was doing to this family. The second one said my behavior was immature and he expected better. The third one said Derek was really struggling and didn't I care about that. The fourth one said I was tearing the family apart and that he hoped I was proud of myself. Derek's first voicemail said I was selfish. His second one said he was sorry for what he said at the table, not for the promissory note, not for the plan, just for calling me someone who thought she was better than everyone else. I thought about that distinction for a long time. I did not return any of the calls. I went back to Charlotte. I went back to work. I told 2 people in my life what had happened, my best friend and one colleague I trusted, and I told them specifically because I wanted witnesses who knew the timeline, who knew what the family had asked and when, who could confirm later, if necessary, that I had not overreacted or fabricated anything. The voicemails continued for 3 weeks. My mother shifted strategies around week 2. She stopped calling and started texting. The texts were gentler, more careful. She said she missed me. She sent a photo of my grandmother. She asked if I was eating okay. She said nothing about the money. I read every text. I responded to none. In week 3, something shifted again. My father called twice in one day, and both voicemails were different from before. Quieter. He said he needed to talk to me. He said something had happened. He said please call him back. I called him back. He told me that Derek's new mortgage application apparently he had applied without the $45,000, trying to see if he could qualify on his own had been denied. The bank had flagged his debt-to-income ratio. Without a significant cash gift or a cosigner, he wasn't going to qualify for the house he wanted anytime soon. My father paused after he said this, like he was waiting for me to respond to that information with something. I said, "I'm sorry to hear that." He said, "Is that all you have to say?" I said, "What would you like me to say?" He said that the family had been counting on me, that he and my mother had promised Derek they would handle it, that they had told him months ago that I would help, before they ever showed me the document, before the birthday dinner, before any of it. They had told Derek I was in before they had asked me. The promissory note wasn't even the ask had apparently been decided already. The dinner was supposed to be the formality. I held the phone and let that settle. They had promised him. Without asking me, they had structured Derek's entire plan around my money before I knew the plan existed. I said, "You made a commitment on my behalf to my brother without my knowledge or consent. When I declined, the consequences fell on him, and now you're asking me to feel responsible for that. I want you to hear yourself, Dad." He said that I was being cold. I said, "I know. I'll talk to you again sometime." I hung up. The silence after that lasted 6 weeks. In those 6 weeks, here is what I found out through my grandmother, who called me on her own every Sunday and who, unlike the rest of my family, spoke to me like an adult. Derek had told several cousins that I had stolen his down payment, not that I had declined to give it, but that it had been mine to give, and I had taken it away from him. I don't know how he arrived at that framing. I think he had been told for so long that my financial stability was a family resource, that the line between my money and a resource he was owed had genuinely blurred for him. My mother had told at least 2 aunts that I was going through something, implying the problem was with my mental state rather than with a notarized document I'd been handed at a birthday dinner. My father had apparently said nothing to anyone, which my grandmother told me she found more troubling than anything else. And Derek had not spoken to my parents since the mortgage was denied. According to my grandmother, he had finally understood that the plan they'd promised him was never fully real, that my agreement had been assumed rather than secured, that the foundation he'd been told to build on wasn't there. He wasn't angry at me, she said. He was angry at them, she said. He's figuring it out. It took something falling apart. I asked her if she thought I should have signed the note. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I think they should have never asked you that way. I think they've asked you to carry things that way your whole life, and I should have said something sooner." She's 90 years old. She's the smallest person in the family, and somehow the only one who made me cry during all of this. Here's where things stand now, and I'll be honest that resolution feels too clean a word for where we actually are. My mother reached out 8 weeks after the dinner. She sent a letter, an actual handwritten letter, 4 pages that I have read, probably a dozen times. She apologized for the way it was done. She said the dinner was a mistake. She said she and my father had been so focused on Derek that they had stopped seeing me clearly, that they had spent years treating my stability as a given and his struggles as an emergency, and that she understood now that was not fair. She did not apologize for asking me to contribute. She apologized for how they asked. I thought about that distinction too. I wrote back 2 paragraphs. I told her I received her letter, and that I appreciated the honesty. I told her I wasn't ready to have a full conversation yet, but that I wasn't gone. I told her I needed time to trust what was being said before I could show up for anything. She texted me within an hour. "Okay, I'll wait." That was 3 weeks ago. My father hasn't reached out directly. My brother sent one text, not a call, just a text, that said, "I don't blame you. I'm sorry for what I said at the table." I haven't responded yet. I'm not sure what I want to say back. I think I want to respond when I have something real to offer, not just an acknowledgement. Here is what I want to say to you, because I've been thinking about this for months now, and I think it matters. I don't think my family is made up of bad people. I think they built a system that worked for a long time, or seemed to work because I cooperated with it. The system needed a person who would absorb, who would contribute without demanding equity, who would be fine. I was fine. I told myself I was fine. And every time I was fine, the system got a little more load-bearing, a little more certain of itself. The birthday dinner was not the beginning of the problem. It was just the first time the system showed itself clearly enough that I couldn't interpret it generously anymore. I've talked to a therapist since then. Not in crisis, just to have somewhere to unpack it carefully. She said something that I keep coming back to, that leaving a system isn't the same as abandoning the people in it. That I can love my family and also refuse to be the structural support for arrangements they built without me. I wrote that down. I have it on a sticky note on my monitor at work. If you are watching this and you recognize something in this story, the feeling of being the capable one, the one who will be fine, the one whose needs are always secondary, because yours are less urgent, I want you to know that the moment you name it out loud, to yourself, even just in your own head, something changes. Not everything changes at once, but something does. I didn't walk out of that dinner with a plan. I walked out because the alternative was signing my name to something that had been decided for me, and I had spent 31 years quietly accepting decisions that had been made for me, and I was tired. I'm still figuring out what my family looks like from here. I think there's a version of it that's smaller, quieter, more honest than before. I think my brother and I might actually talk differently now, that we're not both inside the same system, pulling in opposite directions without knowing why. I think my mother's letter was real. I'm being careful. I'm being slow. But I'm not closed. And I still have every cent of my $45,000. If this story resonated with you, I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever been put in a position like this, asked to carry something that was never yours to carry? Tell me what you did. I'll be reading. And if you're new here, welcome to Revenge Vine. Subscribe if you want to stay. I'll see you in the next one.